Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Brooke Rowell. Alright, so I got a text message from my mom yesterday making a request of me that I guess I knew was coming, but wasn't really sure how I was going to deal with it, and I've been kind of thinking about it for a long time, and it just haven't been able to address the issue, and now I kind of got to make up my mind about it. My mom would like me to speak at my father's funeral and just kind of give some memories now, that I have of him, of special memories that I'll take with me for the rest of my life. And basically the concern was, I kind of expected I'd be eulogizing my father, and I've been knowing that this was coming for 6 months now, but sometimes I can write and sometimes I can't, and when I can't, then when the inspiration isn't flowing, the words just don't come. But I got some ideas of some of the things I want to talk about a little bit, and I'm just going to kind of brainstorm them. We're going to kind of walk around Cameron Park, and I'm going to tell you some memories of my father, and I'll pick and choose from this list of things I'm going to share with you, and I'll turn that into a little 5-minute talk that will be my memories of my father. So let's get going on this. Now, I think the central focus of my memories about my father is going to be the times that he and I worked together on projects, because that was something that was always special to me, and I know it was special to him too, because whenever I brought up the idea of, hey, I got something I need to do at the house and I'd really like you to be there, boom, he'd be there. And he was ready to work, and he was always willing to give ideas and all that. And that kind of became a special memory with me. And so I have special memories of my house just because they involved my father and the projects that we did together. And it started literally right at the beginning when I first started talking about the house. I remember when it all really started. I used to live in an apartment that was literally down the hill from where my house was being built. And for the entire time I lived in the apartment, I knew that it was just oil derricks up on that hill. And I guess the oil companies had started drawing out all of the oil they were going to get out of it. And so they were beginning to decommission it and figure out what they were going to do in the afterlife for that plot of land. And it turned into the housing development that I ultimately moved into. In fact, from the apartment that I lived in, I could actually see my house being built up on the hill, which was always kind of a fun thing for me. And because I lived so close to it, it meant that like every night when I got done with work, I'd just take a run over to it. So that's why I was able to get so many pictures of all stages of its construction. But I remember when I first talked to my father about it, I said, hey, I think I found a house that I want to buy. And at this point, I had just accepted my job at Warner Brothers, which was going to come with a lot more money for pay than I was getting at the previous place. So it seemed like a really kind of a good opportunity to do that. And I remember my father was really excited the first time. And I said, hey, I'd like you to come look at these houses. And they got the models open now. And, let's go look at them and see what we see. I had already kind of gone through the models and had even picked out the model that I want. And so I invited my father and my mom, and we went house hunting. So we all got into the car and took a drive over to this place. Like I said, it was literally up the hill from where my apartment was, so it wasn't much of a drive for me. But my parents lived about 20 miles away at the time, and so they drove over, and we went up to the place and looked at it. And we walked through all of the houses, and I showed my dad the one that I think I wanted. And he said, he got really excited about it, and basically said, if you need someone to co-sign on the loan, I'll help you with that. Turns out I was making enough money at that time that I actually ended up qualifying for the loan on my own. And it really started that day. The day I showed it to my parents, we made the final decision, yep, I'm going to buy it. And I committed to it, and I picked the particular property I want. And I remember they put the X on the on my plot, so I knew this one's going to be mine. And from then on, my father was a part of every part of that house. And it really started right at the beginning with him too, because one of the first things I had to do, because at the time the backyard was just dirt, and so I knew I wanted to put in a lawn, I knew I wanted to put in a brick planter along the wall, and I knew I wanted to build a patio cover. Well, it all had to start with getting the basics done, because see, if I'm going to build a patio cover, I have to have drainage to get the moisture that comes from the patio cover, you know, out to the city, so out to the sewage system, so that we don't end up you know, flooding the backyard or any part of it. And unfortunately, one of the downsides to the house I picked is when they put the fill dirt in, they literally got the lowest quality fill dirt that they could find. And holy cow, this stuff was clay and it was hard as a rock. You know, if it wasn't wet, you know, it was, you literally had to cut your way through it. Wasn't even digging your way through it. We got these big giant iron digger bars that basically, you know, it's a 30 pound or 40 pound bar with like a axe head on the end of it, and basically you just you lifted this thing up and you drove it into the ground, and you use that to break up the soil. And my father and I both bought one of these things, and we dug the original trenches for the flood control and for the sprinklers, and holy cow, that was quite a job, as is scaling this wall here. I'm guessing when it rains back here, this turns into a waterfall. And right now the word fall is the word I don't want to be thinking about right now. Now the first big project we took care of in the yard was actually one that Dad actually took almost total custody of, because I wanted to put an elevated brick planter along the far side of the yard that kind of went against the neighbor's yard. Even then, I kind of liked the idea of big kind of personal spaces where I could just kind of, you know, get away from it all, be my sanctuary from the rest of the world. And since it really was hard to have too much of a sanctuary if you're dealing with you know, neighbors that are 20 or 30 feet away, I tried to erase the borders in the yard by plants or trees or something like that, you know, so that I could kind of maintain, you know, my own little, like I said, sanctuary away from the rest of the world. And I knew I wanted to do kind of an elevated brick planter along the wall of the neighboring house, you know, large amount of dirt and stuff like that I could plant, you know, things that would grow and do well in that area, and, you know, grow big and kind of cover up the neighbor's house. I didn't see it as much, and that was really difficult because due to the slope of the yard as it was, you know, the yard kind of sloped down towards the front. So if you're running a brick planter along that, you still got to keep those bricks level even though the ground is declining. So at the same time, I bought probably 10 or 15 cubic meters of dirt and bought hundreds and hundreds of these brick separator things that you could just stack on top of each other and kind of create a wall. But anyway, as my father was stacking these bricks into position and making sure they were all perfectly level and perfectly flat and all that fun stuff, I was taking all of this dirt which had been dumped in the front yard, moving it into a wheelbarrow and dragging it into the backyard and kind of moving it into the planter as he built it up. Because see, in the back corner of the yard, I knew I wanted to put a palm tree in there, and that ultimately was one of the first things to go in the yard, And that all started with the beginning of that planter. And of course my father was integral in all of that. Shortly after that, I decided I wanted to build a patio cover under, in the back section of the house. And that actually turned out to be a bit of a joke, because the first time I did it, I didn't have a permit to do it. And so the city came in, looked at it and says, no man, you got to tear this all down. And you got to pull it back from the wall a little bit and change the size of it and the level of it and all that. And I didn't want to really do that, because I was going to end up losing a whole bunch of space under the cover. So since they made me pull back in 2 directions, I extended it the other way in the 3rd direction, and actually resulted in a better patio cover that I was much happier with. But he was also there the day we did that, because that involved laying some concrete first. Because when I moved into the house, the concrete went from the front gate just back to the front door. A little bird activity up there. And since we didn't really have to do any work that day, just kind of be there to supervise. My father loves to supervise that kind of stuff. So he spent the whole day there when we laid the concrete out. He also became kind of a good sounding board for, when the workers would come up and say, hey, how do you want to deal with this? He was a valuable source of information on that. And then, of course, once the concrete's set up, then the rest of the job was building the patio cover and figuring out how we'd all going to do all that. And he was there for every step of the construction. And of course, he's willing to offer his advice without actually insisting on doing everything for me, which he very easily could have. He knew I'd needed to learn this stuff, and he let me. And after that patio cover was built and installed and set up and did all the crazy things I wanted it to do, we made sure we got all the inspections and all the permits and all that. And, what I learned from him enabled me to get that done by myself and pass the first time. So that was kind of cool that he had that kind of information to offer. Later on, when we finally decided to install the front lawn, we bought sod, and between the two of us, we laid all the dirt down. We brought in a couple cubic yards of fill dirt just to kind of provide a border, a boundary between the garbage dirt that they left in the yard when they installed the house and the grass, so the grass would have something nutritious to grow roots into. And so we got that all separated out and flattened out and graded the way we wanted. And then he and I literally installed the sod ourselves. And that lawn stayed with the house until I moved out last May. Now, I always had a problem with Flash, because once the lawn was installed, I knew that Flash could live there. And so that was when she came and visited me, came to live with me ultimately, after living at my parents' house for so long. And she had certain places in the yard that she liked to sleep at night. I had a box for her underneath the patio cover when she hibernated in the winter in there. But during the summer, my policy was she could sleep wherever she wants. Well, there were a couple places that she'd sleep, and then when she'd get up in the morning and finally, warm up a little bit, she'd find the first place that she could get near where she spent the night, where there was sun, lay down in the sun, wait to warm up, and then as soon as she was warm, then she started eating. And unfortunately, there were two or three places in the yard where she always ended up in the morning, and she literally ate the grass down to the root, and to the point where it wouldn't even grow. because she'd just eat it all the way down to the ground, and then it'd start growing back a little bit, and she'd chomp on it again, and it'd be gone. So when I visited the house back around Christmas, I actually peered in the backyard, and it looks like the lawn has managed to recover from the flash years because all the bald spots were kind of filled up. Now, about 2 years ago, the HOA I lived in decided that all of the houses in the community needed to be repainted. And we had something like 8 months to complete the project. And basically there were 8 different color patterns that you could use. There were 4 colors for each house, for each pattern, because there was like a primary color and a secondary color, then there was a highlight color, and then ultimately there was a color for metal work, you know, gates, any wrought iron ornamentation on the house, and the front door. Well, my father decided that he wanted to definitely be a big part of this and help in any way he could. And he decided that he was going to tackle that metal gate. Now, this metal gate, normally it wouldn't have been that complicated of a process because the gate itself is just a bunch of metal bars. And so, you know, it just been a matter of going at that with a brush, and it probably would have been a 2-hour job and he would have been done. Well, in addition to having just the metal bar work, it also had this layer of sheet metal that was drilled with little tiny 1/8-inch holes every about 1/4 of an inch, and it was designed so you could see through it and you could get some air passing through it, but it provided a little bit more privacy and a little bit more safety for people who maybe have little pets that could squeeze between the bars. Well, he decided it was easier just to take the gate off the fence and bring it home. Then he could work on it at home, because the first thing you had to do is sand it down, you know, get rid of any of the rust that's built up over the years, and then you paint it. Well, he didn't really have the right tools to do it. He probably should have been using a spray gun for it, but he did it with a paintbrush, and he ended up plugging up each one of these thousands and thousands and thousands of holes on this thing. So at the end of the day, he spent maybe 3 or 4 hours painting the thing and 4 days going through and punching out every one of those holes with a nail. So I knew that he'd had the worst part of that whole job was doing that gate, because while he did other things, there was also some metal work that he painted. That was pretty simple because it was just horizontal and vertical bars. And the front door wasn't that bad either. Once you get all the hardware off of it, you just lay it on its side, and you can paint it with a brush or a roller. That goes pretty easy. And then about 1.5 years ago, I made the final decision that, okay, that's it. I'm done with Disney. I'm leaving. I'm going to fix up my house. I'm going to sell my house, and I'm going to Texas. And when I told my dad that, I told him, no, I'm going to have a lot of work to do on the house. I could really use a good supervisor. And of course, he was there for all of it. And so I ended up doing that. And my father helped a lot because he'd come over during the day and we'd paint. And we'd do other projects around the house just to kind of get, everything ready, because there's a million things that had to be done. Some of those days he was unable to come and visit and come and help, but I know he'd come over in the evenings sometimes and just supervise, because that's what he is. He's the supervisor. So just kind of an apology for all that. This was kind of a stream of consciousness thing. I just had some basic stories I want to get out. Now I'll go home and kind of listen to this video and pick 1 or 2 of those that I think will be the ones that I'll try and flesh out and turn into a proper eulogy for my father. So I hope you enjoyed seeing that, hearing some of my memories of my father, and I will see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night.